Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. The smell hit me first. Dust and old wood polish, mixed with something else I couldn't quite place. Like burnt sugar and copper pennies left too long in the rain. That should have been my first warning. But I was tired. Bone-deep tired from driving 12 hours straight through Nebraska farmland. And all I wanted was to collapse into whatever bed this estate sale house in Millbrook, Iowa had to offer. The realtor had sworn up and down that the furnished rental was move-in ready. Perfect for a writer looking for peace and quiet, she'd said. Her voice too bright over the phone. I should have asked why the previous tenant left all their belongings behind. Before we dive into what happened that October, let me ask you something. When was the last time you heard a radio broadcast that made your skin crawl? Not from what was being said, but from when it was being said. If you're still listening by the end of this, I need you to tell me in the comments if you've ever experienced anything like what I'm about to share, because I'm starting to think I'm not the only one. The story begins now. The house sat at the end of Sycamore Street like a forgotten memory. Victorian bones with good Midwestern sensibility. Wraparound porch that creaked a greeting as I hauled my suitcases up the steps. The key was exactly where the realtor said it would be, under a ceramic frog that grinned at me with chipped paint teeth. Inside, the air hung heavy, not stale exactly, but waiting, like the house had been holding its breath. I dropped my bags in the front hallway and did a quick tour. Living room with a stone fireplace, kitchen with black and white checkered floors, narrow stairs that groaned under my weight. Everything was clean but dated. Floral wallpaper that probably hadn't been changed since the 70s. Furniture that belonged in an antique shop, and in the corner of the living room, the radio. It caught my eye immediately. Not because it was particularly beautiful, though the dark walnut case had a certain dignity to it. No, it was the way the evening light hit the dial, made the numbers glow amber, even though it wasn't plugged in. A Zenith floor model, probably from the 40s, the kind with the big round dial on top and fabric-covered speakers. My grandfather had one just like it in his basement. Used to let me tune through the static looking for baseball games when I was a kid. I ran my fingers over the smooth wood. No dust. Strange, considering everything else had that thin film that settles on abandoned things. The brass plate on the front read, Zenith Radio Corporation, Chicago, Illinois. Below that, scratched into the wood in shaky letters, property of H. Morrison. That first night, I ordered Chinese food from the only place in town that delivered. Ate it straight from the containers while unpacking my laptop and notebooks. I'd come to Millbrook to finish my novel, a thriller about a woman who inherits her grandmother's house and discovers family secrets. The irony wasn't lost on me, sitting in someone else's abandoned home, surrounded by their abandoned things. Around 10 o'clock, I decided to call it a night. The drive had worn me out, and I still had to make the bed with the sheets I'd brought. But as I reached for the lamp switch, the radio clicked on. Static at first. That distinctive white noise that old radios make, like ocean waves made of electricity. Then, faintly, music, big band stuff. Tommy Dorsey maybe, or Glenn Miller. The kind my grandmother used to hum while doing dishes. I stared at the radio, still unplugged. The cord coiled neatly behind it like a sleeping snake. The music grew clearer. In the mood, definitely Glenn Miller. But there was something off about it. The recording quality was too good, too immediate. Not like a remastered version or a modern recording. It sounded live, present. Like the orchestra was playing just beyond the fabric speakers. Then the music faded, and a voice emerged from the static. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is KML, broadcasting from the heart of America. The time is 10:15 on this beautiful October evening, October 15th, 1943. My mouth went dry. I pulled out my phone. October 15th, 2023, exactly 80 years. We interrupt our regular programming for a special announcement from the War Department. I reached for the radio, found the power knob, turned it. The voice continued. Casualties from the Italian campaign continue to mount. The Department of War regrets to inform the following families. Click, click, click. The knob spun uselessly in my fingers. Then, clear as if someone was standing beside me. I heard it. A woman crying. Soft, muffled, like she was trying not to be heard. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. From inside the radio, from the walls, from the air itself. The broadcast continued reading names. American boys who'd never come home. Each one delivered with that detached professionalism news announcers perfected during the war. And behind it all, that crying, getting louder, more desperate. I jerked the radio away from the wall. The plug scraped across the hardwood floor. Definitely not connected to anything. The voices didn't stop. Private Harold Morrison of Millbrook, Iowa. The crying became a wail. The radio dial glowed brighter, amber shifting to orange, to red. Heat radiated from the wooden case. The smell of burnt electrical components filled the room. Then silence. The dial went dark. The radio sat there, innocent as furniture. I stood in my empty living room, heart hammering. Chinese food cooling in its containers. Outside, modern cars drove down modern streets. But for those few minutes, I'd been somewhere else. Someone else. I didn't sleep much that night, kept waiting for the radio to spring back to life. Kept hearing that woman's crying in the walls. Around 3 a.m., I gave up and Googled Harold Morrison, Millbrook, Iowa, 1943. The first result made my hands shake. A scanned newspaper clipping from the Millbrook Gazette. October 20th, 1943. Local boy dies in Italian campaign. Private Harold Morrison, age 19. Survived by his mother, Helen Morrison of 542 Sycamore Street. I was in 542 Sycamore Street. The article included a photograph. Harold in his uniform. Young face serious under his garrison cap. But it was the second photograph that made me close my laptop. Helen Morrison, standing in front of a house. This house, and in the window behind her. Visible but blurred. The distinctive outline of a Zenith floor model radio. I told myself I'd leave in the morning. Pack up, call the realtor. Make some excuse about a family emergency. But morning came with golden October light and the smell of coffee from the kitchen I hadn't made. And suddenly the previous night felt like a bad dream. Old houses make weird noises. Old electronics do weird things. The crying could have been wind in the walls. The broadcast, well, maybe there was a station doing a historical retrospective. Lots of them did that. War anniversary programming. I spent the day writing, or trying to, kept finding myself staring at the radio. It sat silent in its corner, morning light playing across the dial. Just furniture, just wood and wire and old components that couldn't possibly work without power. Around lunchtime, I walked into town. Millbrook's main street looked like a movie set. Hardware store, diner, library. American flags hanging from every other storefront. I stopped at the library. A Carnegie building with limestone steps worn smooth by a century of feet. The librarian, a woman named Doris with silver hair and careful hands, helped me find the local history section. I told her I was writing about World War II, researching homefront stories. Not exactly a lie. "Oh, you'll want the Morrison collection then," she said, leading me to a corner filled with archived boxes. Helen Morrison donated everything after she passed. Letters, photographs, even some recordings her son sent from overseas. Such a tragedy, that family. Recordings? Oh yes, Harold had access to recording equipment through the USO, sent his mother these little discs. Audio letters. We have them on tape now, but the originals are too fragile to play. She left me with the boxes. I spent hours going through them. Letters from Harold describing Italy, photographs of him with his unit, and then, in the last box, a manila envelope marked Radio Transcripts, October 1943. Inside were carbon copies of news broadcasts. KML radio, the same station I'd heard, the same announcer, and there, October 15th, the same casualty list, the same words, exactly as I'd heard them the night before. But it was the note paper-clipped to the transcript that made my hands shake. Helen, I've made copies of all the broadcasts as you requested. I understand how important it is to know exactly when Harold's name was read. Please remember, you are not alone in your grief. Father Mackenzie. I walked back to the house as the sun set. The radio waited for me. Dial dark. Cord still unplugged. I sat on the couch and watched it like it might spring to life. It didn't disappoint. At exactly 10:15, the same click, the same static, but this time, different music. I'll be seeing you. Bing Crosby's voice honey smooth through the old speakers. A song about missing someone, about all the familiar places that remind you of them. Then footsteps, high heels on hardwood, pacing, back and forth, back and forth. The floorboards above my head creaked with each step. I was alone in the house. The pacing stopped directly overhead, my bedroom. Then a drawer opening, rustling paper, a woman's voice. So faint I had to strain to hear. Harold, my dear Harold, I can't. The radio crackled. Through the static, I heard it. A young man's voice. Tinny, like it was coming through a bad overseas connection. Mother, can you hear me? I'm here, I'm safe, The woman upstairs let out a sob that seemed to shake the walls. The footsteps resumed. Faster now. Frantic. The radio dial glowed brighter. That burnt copper smell filled the room. Mother, please, I need to tell you something. About what happened. About why I'm still... Static swallowed his words. The pacing stopped. Then, a sound I'll never forget. The distinctive creak of rope under strain. I ran upstairs, threw open the bedroom door, empty. Just an old four-poster bed and a dresser with an oval mirror. But in the mirror's reflection, for just a second, I saw her. Helen Morrison, standing on a chair, rope in her hands. Eyes locked on something I couldn't see. Then the mirror showed only me. Pale. Terrified. Alone. Downstairs, the radio played on. Harold's voice. Clearer now. Tried to tell them I was alive. The telegram was wrong. I'm in a field hospital. Mother. Why won't you answer? Why won't anyone answer? I stumbled back down the stairs. The radio glowed like a coal. Harold's voice grew more desperate. I can hear you crying. I can hear your footsteps. Mother, please, don't. A crack like lightning. The radio went silent. The dial dark. In the sudden quiet, I heard it. A whisper that might have been the wind. Too late. Always too late. I should have left then. Any rational person would have. But rationality had packed its bags the moment that radio first sparked to life. Instead, I did what any writer would do. I started documenting everything. Every night at 10:15. The broadcast began. Always from 1943. Always KML. But the content changed. October 16th brought comedy shows. Jack Benny making jokes about rationing while somewhere in the house. Helen Morrison laughed, a broken sound. like she was trying to remember how. October 17th was war bonds advertisements. Buy bonds today, bring our boys home tomorrow. Each time they mentioned bringing soldiers home. The temperature dropped. Frost spread across the windows despite the furnace running. October 18th, music all night. But between songs, I heard them talking, Harold and Helen, fragments of conversations that never happened. I got your letter about the Victory Garden. Saved sugar rations for your birthday cake. When I come home for Christmas. Conversations from a world where telegrams delivered different news. Where October 15th, 1943 passed like any other day. I tried recording the broadcasts on my phone. Static. Nothing but static. I brought in a digital recorder. A professional one I used for interviews. It picked up my breathing. The house settling. But where the radio voices should have been, silence. The radio only performed for human ears. Or maybe, only for certain humans. On October 19th, I broke pattern. Instead of waiting in the living room, I went upstairs at 10:14, sat on the bed in what had been Helen's room. The wallpaper had faded, but I could still make out the pattern. Tiny roses, the kind of optimistic decorating people did before the war, when they still believed in tomorrow. 10:15 came, no radio static, no broadcast. Instead, the drawer of the bedside table slid open. Inside, letters. Not old, brittle things. Fresh, ink still wet. Harold's handwriting, which I recognized from the archives. Mother, the doctors say I'll be home by Thanksgiving. My unit caught some shrapnel outside Rome, but we're all patched up. Tell Mrs. Henderson her son Jimmy is here too. He's playing cards with... The letter faded mid-sentence, like someone had lifted the pen and forgotten to finish. I reached for it, and my fingers passed through paper that wasn't there. Behind me, a sigh. I turned. The oval mirror showed two reflections, mine and Helen Morrison's. She sat at a vanity that didn't exist in my world, pinning up her hair. She looked younger than in the photographs, hopeful. He writes every week, she said to her reflection, or to mine. Such a good boy, never forgets his mother. Helen, I whispered. She smiled, but her eyes were black holes, empty spaces where October 15th had carved out everything. I'm making his favorite for dinner, pot roast. Do you think he'll be hungry? It's been so long since... The mirror cracked. Spiderweb fractures spreading from the center. In each fragment, a different Helen. Young Helen reading a letter. Middle-aged Helen at Harold's graduation. Old Helen that never was, bouncing grandchildren on her knee. Helens from timelines where Western Union never knocked. The cracks spread, reached the edges. The mirror exploded in absolute silence. When I opened my eyes, glass covered the floor, but the mirror on the wall remained whole, reflecting only me and an empty room. Downstairs, the radio hummed. Not a broadcast this time, a tune without words. Something mournful and old. Music for mourning. Music for the space between what was and what should have been. I found myself humming along, knew the melody though I'd never heard it before. My feet carried me down the stairs without my permission. The radio glowed, soft and inviting, like a fireplace on a cold night, but the heat it gave off was wrong. Cold fire, burning ice, the kind of warmth that steals instead of gives. On the coffee table, Harold's service photo had appeared. I knew I hadn't put it there in the amber light. His young face seemed to move, eyes tracking me as I circled the radio, lips forming words I couldn't hear. No, that wasn't right. I could hear them, just not with my ears. Tell her I'm coming home. Tell her it was a mistake. Tell her. She knows, I said to the photograph, to the radio, to the house that held them both. She's always known. The humming stopped. The silence that followed had weight, pressed against my eardrums, made my teeth ache. Then, clear as church bells, the radio spoke in Harold's voice. October 15th never ends here. She won't let it. Every night, she waits for the broadcast. Every night, I die again, and every night, she. The ceiling creaked. That distinctive sound of rope under strain. You have to make her understand. I'm not coming home. I'm already home. I've been home since... Static swallowed his words. When it cleared, a different voice. Older, familiar. This is KML, signing off for October 19th, 2023. Tomorrow marks 80 years since. I lunged for the radio. My hands found the volume knob, turned it down. But Harold's voice rose above the broadcast. She's coming. Every night she gets closer to crossing over, to joining me in this signal, this frequency between life and death. But if she does, if she finally lets go... The lights flickered, went out. In the darkness, the radio dial was the only illumination. And in that amber glow, I saw her. Helen Morrison stood beside the radio, not transparent, not ghostly, solid as furniture, real as regret. She wore a house dress, flour dusted on the front. Her hands worried at a dish towel. "Is that Harold?" she asked. "Is he calling? I thought I heard..." "Helen," my voice cracked. "Helen, I'll get supper on. He'll be hungry." She turned toward the kitchen, paused. "You'll stay? I always make too much for just two." Then she was gone. Not vanished, just walked into the kitchen that existed 80 years ago. I heard pots clanging, water running, the normal sounds of meal preparation. The radio crackled back to life. Harold, urgent now. You can't let her finish that meal. Every night she cooks, every night she waits, and every night at midnight when I don't come home. She. I knew how the story ended. Had known since that first night. Helen Morrison had waited 3 days after the telegram, cooked 3 dinners, set 3 places, and when October 18th became October 19th with no knock at the door, she'd gone upstairs, stood on a chair, and joined her son the only way she knew how. But here, in this house, in this bubble of time, she was still waiting, still hoping, still cooking dinners for a ghost who couldn't eat them. And Harold, trapped in the frequencies, trying to tell her he was already home. October 19th bled toward midnight. I sat between 2 times, 2 worlds. While Helen Morrison made dinner in 1943 and her son called out from the static of 2023. The radio had become a bridge, or maybe a wound, something that wouldn't heal because neither of them would let it. At 11:45, I heard her call from the kitchen. "Supper's ready. Harold, wash up now." Footsteps on the stairs, but not from above, from below, from somewhere deeper than the basement. The rhythm of a soldier's march, getting closer. The radio dial spun wild. Stations blurred past. Fragments of 8 decades. News of Kennedy's assassination. Moon landing coverage. 9/11's reports. All of it spinning faster, until the voices became a scream of history, of time itself protesting. Then silence, and in that silence, a knock at the door. 3 short raps. Military precision. "Harold!" Helen's voice, joy and terror mixed. "Harold, is that you?" I moved without thinking. Stepped between her and the door. "Helen, wait." She looked through me. Literally through. I was the ghost here. The intruder in her perfect loop of loss. The knock came again, harder. The door bulged inward with each impact. Whatever stood outside, it wasn't Harold. Not the Harold who'd left for war. This was something else. Something made of static and sorrow and 80 years of refusing to let go. "Mother." The voice came from everywhere, from the radio, from the walls, from the thing beyond the door. "Mother, let me in. I'm so cold. I've been cold for so long." Helen's hand reached for the doorknob. I grabbed her wrist. For a moment, just a moment, my fingers found solid flesh, real, warm, alive. She looked at me then, truly saw me, and in her eyes, I saw she knew, had always known. Every night for 80 years, she'd known what waited beyond that door, what would happen if she opened it. "He's my son," she whispered. "A mother doesn't abandon her son." "He's already home," I said. Repeated Harold's words. "He's been home all along, in your heart, in your memories. That's where he lives. Not out there, not in the static." The knocking became pounding. The door splintered. Through the cracks, nothing. Just dark. The kind of dark that existed before frequency and broadcast, before voices could travel through air. Helen's hand trembled on the knob. "But I hear him every night. Because you're listening to the wrong station." I guided her hand away from the door, toward the radio. "Turn it off, Helen. Let him rest. Let yourself rest." "I can't. If I stop listening, if I stop waiting, then he's really gone." The pounding stopped. In the sudden quiet, Harold's voice. Not from the radio, from the photograph on the table, young and clear and full of life. "I love you, Mother. I'll always love you, but you have to let go. You have to let us both go." Helen sobbed. 60 years of tears all at once. Her hand found the radio's power knob. Such a small movement, such an impossible weight. "Will it hurt?" she asked. "Letting go?" I thought of my own ghosts, the people I'd lost, the voices I still heard in quiet moments. "Yes, but holding on hurts more." She turned the knob. Click. The radio died, not just off, dead. The glow faded from the dial like the last ember of a burnt-out fire. The house exhaled. A breath held for 80 years finally released. Helen looked at me, smiled. And for a moment, she wasn't the grieving mother. She was young Helen, old Helen, every Helen in between. All of them finally free. "Thank you," she said. Then she was gone. Not dramatically, just gone. Like morning mist when the sun gets high. I stood in an empty house, my house, the rental in Millbrook, Iowa. The radio sat silent in its corner. When I checked behind it, the power cord had rotted away. Nothing but fabric insulation and corroded copper, but on the coffee table, Harold's photograph remained, and beside it, a letter I hadn't seen before. Dated October 19th, 2023. Today, to whoever finds this, they say the dead don't rest when the living won't let go. But sometimes, the living can't rest when the dead won't let go either. This house held us both. The radio was our anchor, our curse, our only connection. I'm with him now. Finally, it doesn't hurt anymore. Thank you for turning it off. Thank you for letting us go. Helen Morrison, P.S. The radio still works. On certain frequencies, in certain houses, for certain people. Be careful what you tune into. Be careful what you hear. Some broadcasts aren't meant for the living, and some voices, once heard, never stop calling. I left Millbrook the next morning, packed my things, dropped the key at the realtor's office, made excuses about the house not being right for my work. She didn't seem surprised. Places like that, they never stay rented long, but I kept Harold's photograph and Helen's letter. Reminders that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for the dead is let them go, let them be dead, let them find whatever comes after the static. The thing is, I've been traveling since then, state to state, town to town, trying to outrun what I heard in that house. But last week, in a motel outside Denver, I found another radio, same model, same wood, same brass plate, and scratched into the case in shaky letters, property of E. Whitman. It turned on at 10:15. Different voices, different year, different war, but the same static. the same sorrow, the same refusal to let go. I turned it off, unplugged it, left it in the motel dumpster. But I know there are others, in estate sales, antique shops, abandoned houses, radios that remember, that replay, that refuse to let October 15th, or December 7th, or September 11th, ever really end. If you find one, if you hear the voices, if the dead start calling from the static, do what I couldn't do that first night. Walk away. Let someone else turn the knob. Let someone else bridge the gap between then and now. Because some frequencies, once you tune in, you never really tune out. Some voices follow you home. And I swear, sometimes, late at night, when I'm almost asleep, I still hear Helen calling Harold for dinner. Still hear Harold trying to answer. Still hear that radio, humming in the dark, waiting for someone else to listen, waiting for someone else to care. So I need to know, have you ever heard voices from the past, not memories, but actual voices? Broadcasts that shouldn't exist? Radios that work without power? Leave a comment below. Tell me I'm not alone in this. Tell me you've heard them too. Because lately, I've been thinking about going back to Millbrook, back to that house. The realtor says it's still empty, still furnished, still waiting. And every night at 10:15, I wonder, is Helen really gone? Or is she just waiting for someone new to turn the dial? Someone who'll listen. Someone who'll care. Someone who'll never, ever let go. Subscribe if you want to hear what happens if I go back. Comment if you've experienced something similar. Share if you think others need to be warned. Because the static is spreading, and the dead are getting louder. Sweet dreams. Story number 2. They say memories fade like old photographs. But some memories, they burn themselves into your mind so deep that 40 years can't dim them. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and what I'm about to tell you happened in Millbrook, Oregon. Back in 1983, I was 12 years old, and I watched my best friends walk into a fog that shouldn't have existed. They never came back, and before you ask, no. This isn't some urban legend you've heard before. This is what really happened. The truth that nobody in Millbrook talks about anymore. Wait, did you hear that? That sound outside your window just now? Probably nothing. Probably just the wind. But if you see fog rolling in tonight, especially if it's moving against the wind, maybe you should stop listening. Maybe you should... No, you need to hear this. Because it's happening again. Last week, 3 kids went missing in Portland. The news called it a runaway situation. But I saw the weather report that morning. Clear skies. No fog predicted. Until suddenly, there was. All right, the story begins now. October in Millbrook meant 2 things. Fallen leaves that crunched under your sneakers, and fog so thick you could barely see your own hand. But the fog that rolled in on October 23rd, 1983, that was different. I remember because it was a Sunday, and Mom had made her famous apple pancakes. The smell still fills my kitchen sometimes. Phantom scents that make my hands shake. Tommy Chen lived next door, and Katie Morrison lived across the street. We'd been best friends since kindergarten. That kind of friendship where you don't knock, you just walk in. Sarah, you gotta see this. Tommy burst through our back door that morning, syrup still on his chin. His eyes were wide. The way they got when he found a really cool bug or scored the winning goal in soccer. What now? I groaned, still in my Pac-Man pajamas. The fog, it's purple. I laughed. Fog isn't purple, dummy. But Katie was already at the door, her red hair wild from running. He's right. Sarah, come look. But don't tell your mom. That should have been my first warning. Katie never kept secrets from adults. She was the kind of kid who reminded teachers about homework. We crept outside. The morning air bit at my cheeks. But it wasn't the cold that made me shiver. The fog. Tommy was right. Where it touched the streetlights, where it caught the early morning sun, it had this sick purple tinge, like a bruise, like something rotten. It's probably just pollution, I said. But my voice came out smaller than I wanted. My dad says the paper mill. Listen. Katie grabbed my arm. Her fingers were ice cold. That's when I heard it. Have you ever heard wind chimes in a storm? That desperate, chaotic music they make? It was like that, but underneath. Like it was coming from inside the fog itself. And there was something else. If I held my breath, if I really concentrated, I could hear voices. Children's voices. Laughing. We should go back inside, I whispered. But Tommy was already walking toward the street, toward where the fog hung thickest. Don't be babies. It's just weird weather. Besides, he turned back, grinning that gap-toothed smile of his. When are we gonna see purple fog again? Katie looked at me. I looked at her. We both knew this was wrong. Every instinct screamed at us to run home. Lock the doors. Hide under the covers. But we were 12, and Tommy was already disappearing into that bruised mist. So we followed. The fog wrapped around us like a living thing, cold and damp, and somehow hungry. That's the only word for it, hungry. The chiming got louder, but it didn't sound like metal anymore. It sounded organic, like teeth chattering, like bones clicking together. Tommy, I called out, but the fog swallowed my voice, made it sound like I was shouting from the bottom of a well. Over here. His voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Guys, you gotta see this. There's a path. I grabbed Katie's hand. She squeezed back so hard it hurt, but I didn't let go. We stumbled forward, following Tommy's voice. The sidewalk under our feet felt wrong, soft, like walking on meat. Then the fog parted, just for a second, and I saw it. A path that shouldn't have been there. It cut straight through Mr. Henderson's front yard. But it wasn't made of concrete or dirt. It looked like glass. Black glass that reflected nothing. And Tommy was standing at its edge, staring down at something we couldn't see. Tommy, no. Katie's voice broke. Please, let's go home. But he wasn't listening. His eyes had gone glassy, unfocused, like when my uncle drank too much at Thanksgiving. They're calling me, he said, and his voice, God, his voice, sounded like an echo of itself. Can't you hear them? They want to play. That's when I saw them, the children in the fog. They moved wrong, jerky, like old film missing frames. Their faces were blurred, but I could see their mouths. All of them were smiling. Too wide, too many teeth. And their eyes were just holes. Deep, black holes that seemed to pull at something behind my ribs. New friends, one of them said, but its mouth didn't move right. The words just appeared in my head, cold and sharp. Come play with us, forever and ever and ever. Tommy took a step onto the black path. No! I lunged forward, grabbed his shirt. For the moment he touched that glass, something changed. The air got thick, like trying to breathe soup, and Tommy, he turned to look at me, and his eyes were starting to go dark at the edges. It's okay, Sarah, he smiled, and for a second, I saw too many teeth in his mouth, too. It doesn't hurt, it's like going to sleep, but better, because you never have to wake up. Katie screamed. The sound snapped something in my head, broke whatever spell was trying to worm its way into my brain. I yanked Tommy backward with all my 12-year-old strength, and we tumbled onto the normal sidewalk. For a moment, everything stopped. The fog held its breath. The chiming went silent. Even those horrible children froze mid-motion. Then Tommy blinked, shook his head. What? What was I doing? Run! I whispered, then louder. Run! We ran, sneakers slapping against concrete, hearts hammering. The fog chased us. I swear it did, reaching out with fingers of mist, trying to drag us back. Behind us, Those children things started to wail, a sound like nails on glass, like babies crying, like something dying. We burst through my back door so hard we knocked over Mom's potted fern. Soil everywhere. Mom came running, furious, but she took one look at our faces and the anger died. What happened? What's wrong? We couldn't explain. How do you tell your mother that the fog tried to eat your friend? That there are things in the mist pretending to be children? That there's a path in Mr. Henderson's yard that leads to… where? But we didn't have to explain, because that's when the phone started ringing. All over Millbrook. Phones were ringing. Parents calling parents. Checking on kids. Counting heads. By noon. They knew. 3 children were missing. Jenny Patterson, age 10, Marcus Webb, age 11, and Timothy Marsh, age 9. They'd all been playing outside when the fog rolled in. They'd all walked into it, and they never came back. The search started immediately. Police, firefighters, volunteers from 3 counties. They combed through every inch of Millbrook. Bloodhounds, helicopters, the works. But how do you track someone through fog that disappeared the moment the sun got high enough? Mr. Henderson swore there was no path through his yard. No black glass, nothing, just his prized roses and the lawn he mowed twice a week. They brought in some expert from Portland who explained about temperature inversions and industrial pollutants, how they could make fog look different colors. Everyone nodded. Everyone pretended to believe it. But I saw the way parents held their kids a little tighter, the way curtains twitched whenever mist started forming, the way nobody, and I mean nobody, let their children play outside on foggy mornings anymore. Tommy, Katie, and I, we didn't talk about what we saw, not to adults, not to each other. It was like if we didn't say it out loud, maybe it hadn't really happened. Maybe those things in the fog were just shadows. Maybe that path was just a trick of the light. Maybe. 3 days later, they found Jenny Patterson's shoe. It was sitting in the middle of Main Street, right outside the library. Perfectly clean. Laces still tied, like she'd just stepped out of it and kept walking. Her mother identified it by the unicorn sticker on the heel, started sobbing right there on the sidewalk while the whole town watched. They never found the other shoe. They never found anything else. The investigation went on for months. FBI got involved. There were rumors about a serial kidnapper, about a cult, about drugs in the water supply. Anything but the truth. Because the truth was impossible, wasn't it? Winter came early that year. By December, Millbrook was buried under 2 feet of snow, and everybody seemed to exhale. No fog in winter. We were safe. The 3 missing kids became 4 when Rachel Howard didn't come home from ice skating. But that was different, wasn't it? She'd fallen through thin ice. They said, a tragedy, but a normal one, an explainable one. Except, Tommy had seen her the night before she disappeared, and she'd told him about the voices she'd been hearing in the snow. Voices calling her name. Telling her about a special place where winter never ended, and she could skate forever. She had that same look, Tommy whispered to me at lunch, and hunched over his tray of mystery meat, like I had when I almost… Stop, I cut him off. Just stop. But I knew what he meant. I'd been having dreams about that black glass path, about following it to see where it led. In the dreams. Those children things would take my hands. Their touch was cold, but not unpleasant. Like sinking into a cool bath on a hot day, they'd lead me deeper into the fog, and I could see a place on the other side, a playground that stretched forever. Swings that never stopped moving. Slides that went up instead of down. And all the children there were playing, never getting tired, never growing up, never going home. I'd wake up with my feet on the floor, halfway to my bedroom door. Katie started carrying salt in her pockets. Said her grandmother told her it protected against evil spirits. Tommy wore a cross even though his family was Buddhist. I kept an old iron nail under my pillow. Something I'd read in a library book about folklore. None of it helped when the fog came back in March. This time, it rolled in during school hours. We were in Mrs. Peterson's English class, discussing where the red fern grows, when Jessica Mills pointed out the window and screamed. The fog was pressing against the glass, purple-black and thick as paint, and in it, faces, dozens of small faces, pressed against the windows, mouths open, fogging up the glass from the outside. Mrs. Peterson pulled the blind so fast she broke the cord. Everyone away from the windows, now. But we could still hear them. Fingernails on glass, that chiming sound, getting louder, and underneath it all, singing. A nursery rhyme I'd never heard before, round and round the foggy path. The children chase the morning. Careful, or you'll lose your laugh, and wake up never yawning. The principal came on the intercom. Lockdown, nobody leaves the building. Nobody opens a door, nobody goes near the windows. We huddled in the center of the classroom while Mrs. Peterson read to us. Her voice shook, but she kept reading, kept trying to drown out the sounds from outside. It lasted 3 hours. 3 hours of scraping, chiming, singing. 3 hours of absolute terror. When it finally ended, when the fog pulled back like a tide going out, 2 more kids were missing. They'd been in the bathroom, just down the hall. The door was still locked from the inside. The window was painted shut. Hadn't been opened in years. But David Park and Melissa Connolly were gone. Like they'd never existed at all. That's when people started leaving Millbrook. Families packed up overnight. Houses stood empty. For sale signs sprouted like mushrooms after rain. My parents talked about it too. Late at night when they thought I was asleep. Dad had a job offer in California. Mom's sister lived in Arizona. Anywhere but here. But we stayed. Don't ask me why. Maybe because leaving felt like admitting it was real. Maybe because we thought we were safe if we just followed the rules. Don't go out in the fog, stay together. Stay inside, stay alive. The town board brought in more experts. Meteorologists, psychologists, even a priest, though nobody wanted to admit that officially. They installed new street lights, bright ones that were supposed to burn through any weather. They set up a warning system, sirens that would go off when fog was detected. None of it mattered, because the fog wasn't following rules anymore. It started coming at night, seeping through cracks under doors, pooling in basements. Mrs. Chen woke up to find it filling her bedroom, hovering just inches above her sleeping husband. She screamed, turned on every light in the house. It retreated, but slowly, like it was thinking about it, considering its options. Tommy's older brother, Michael, saw it coming out of the shower drain while he was brushing his teeth. Just a little tendril at first. Then more. Purple-black fog rising from the pipes, bringing that chiming sound with it. He ran out so fast he slipped on the bath mat, cracked his head on the toilet. Needed 6 stitches, but he was lucky. The fog didn't follow him to the hospital. Katie's dog, Buster, went missing for 2 days. When he came back, he wouldn't stop staring at empty corners, growling at nothing. They found him one morning standing at the back door, every hair on end, staring at a patch of ordinary morning mist. He wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep, just stood there, shaking, until one day he simply laid down and didn't get up again. The vet said it was heart failure, natural causes, but Katie and I knew better. Buster had seen something in that mist, something that scared him to death. By May, 17 kids had vanished. The National Guard showed up. Scientists with equipment I couldn't begin to understand. They measured everything. Temperature, humidity, electromagnetic fields, radiation, all normal, all perfectly explainable. Except for the recordings. One of the scientists, Dr. Walsh, she was nice, didn't talk down to us kids like the others. She let me and Tommy look at some of her equipment. showed us how the sound recorders worked. "We're picking up infrasound," she explained. "Frequencies too low for human ears. But look at this." She showed us a printout. Waves and spikes that meant nothing to me. But her face was pale, worried. "When we isolate the pattern and speed it up to audible range," she hit a button. Children laughing, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Layer upon layer of laughter. But there was something wrong with it. Like they were laughing because they had to, not because anything was funny. "Turn it off," Tommy whispered. "Please." Dr. Walsh did, but the sound stuck in my head. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. The breaking point came on Memorial Day weekend. The town was having a picnic, trying to pretend things were normal, trying to show we weren't afraid. Mayor Robertson gave a speech about community strength, resilience, not letting fear win. The fog rolled in while he was still talking. It came from all directions at once, rising from storm drains, descending from clear sky, seeping out of the ground itself. Purple, black, and hungry. The sirens wailed, but it was too late. It was already everywhere. People ran, screaming, pushing. Someone knocked over the grill, hot dogs rolling in the dirt. Mrs. Patterson was sobbing, clutching a photo of Jenny. Mr. Webb was shouting his son's name. "Marcus, Marcus, Marcus." And then, in the middle of all that chaos, I saw them. The missing children. They stood at the edge of the fog. All of them. Jenny Patterson, Marcus Webb, Timothy Marsh, David Park, Melissa Connolly, all 17. They looked exactly the same as the day they disappeared. Same clothes, same faces, but their eyes were infinite, empty and full at the same time, like looking into deep space. "Mom?" Jenny stepped forward. Her voice carried despite the screaming, the sirens, the chaos. "Mom, I want to come home." Mrs. Patterson lunged toward her daughter. People tried to hold her back, but she fought like an animal, clawing, biting. She broke free, ran towards Jenny with her arms wide. The moment she touched her daughter, she started changing. It happened fast. Her skin went gray, then translucent. Like frosted glass, her scream cut off mid-breath. And then she was falling. Not down, but through, like the ground had become water. Jenny caught her mother's hand, smiled that too-wide smile. "Now we can play forever," she said. They both sank into the fog and disappeared. That's when the real panic started. The fog children moved forward, calling names. "Mommy, Daddy, come play with us. Come see our special place. We missed you so much." Some parents ran, some stood frozen, and some walked toward their lost children like they were in a trance. Deputy Morrison tried to stop them, shot his gun into the air. The fog children laughed, that layered, wrong laughter from Dr. Walsh's recording. Katie grabbed my hand. "We have to go, now!" But I couldn't move because one of the fog children was looking right at me, a little boy, maybe 6 years old. I didn't recognize him. He wasn't from Millbrook, but he knew me. "Sarah," he said, and his voice was like winter wind. "You were supposed to come with us. That first day, you were chosen." "No." I could barely get the word out. He tilted his head, smiled. "It's okay, we can wait. We have all the time in the world. And one day, when you're not expecting it, when you've almost forgotten, we'll come back for you." Tommy yanked me backward, broke whatever spell was forming. We ran, Katie, Tommy, and me. Ran through streets filled with fog and screaming. Ran past people disappearing into purple mist. Ran past fog children calling, calling, calling. We made it to my house. Slammed the door. My parents were there. Dad boarding up windows. Mom filling every sink and tub with water, like we were preparing for a hurricane. "Basement," Dad ordered, "now." We huddled in the basement for 2 days. No power, no phone, just the battery radio. Listening to emergency broadcasts that made no sense. Stay indoors. No, evacuate immediately. No, wait for military escort. No, no, no. When we finally came out, Millbrook was a ghost town. They said 247 people disappeared that weekend. The official story kept changing. Gas leak, mass hallucination, terrorist attack with hallucinogens. Anything but the truth. The town was evacuated, quarantined, miles of chain-link fence topped with razor wire. My family moved to Ohio, Tommy's went to Texas, Katie ended up in Florida. We promised to stay in touch, but what do you say? Hey, remember that time interdimensional fog children tried to steal us? How's algebra going? I tried to forget, threw myself into being normal, high school, college, marriage, kids, a normal life in a normal town where fog was just fog and children didn't disappear. But I never forgot that little boy's promise. One day, when you're not expecting it, I became a teacher, elementary school, don't ask me why. Maybe I thought I could protect them. Watch for signs. Keep them safe. For 30 years, I watched every fog bank, listened for chiming sounds, looked for purple tints in the mist. Nothing. Just regular fog, regular weather, regular life. Until last week, I was grading papers. Cup of coffee going cold, rain pattering against windows. Normal Tuesday night. Then my phone buzzed. News alert. 3 Portland children missing in unexplained circumstances. Witnesses report unusual fog bank despite clear weather predictions. My hands started shaking. Coffee everywhere, all over Emma Martinez's book report. I called Tommy first. He's a contractor in Austin now. Has twin boys. Did you see the news? I asked. Long pause. Yeah, it's probably not. It is, I said. You know it is. Katie was harder to reach. She's a nurse, works crazy hours, but she called me back at 3 a.m. I've been having the dreams again. She whispered, the path, the playground. Sarah, my daughter, asked me yesterday why the fog outside her window was purple. We met in Portland 2 days ago. First time we'd been together since 8th grade graduation. Tommy's got gray in his beard. Katie's hands shake from too much caffeine. And me? I look in the mirror and see my grandmother. But when we stood together, looking at the spot where those 3 kids vanished, we were 12 again, terrified and small and completely out of our depth. The fog rolled in while we were standing there, purple-black, thick, alive, and in it. That little boy, still 6 years old, still smiling. "Hello, Sarah," he said. "We told you we'd wait." Behind him, shapes in the mist. All the missing children, from Millbrook, from Portland, from how many other towns, how many other times. They stood there, patient as death, waiting. "What do you want?" Katie's voice was steady, her hands weren't. "To play," they said in unison. "To have friends, to never be alone, to never grow up, to never hurt, to never die." "That's not living." Tommy stepped forward, and God, he was brave, braver than any of us had been at 12. "That's just existing." The little boy laughed, that wrong, layered laugh. "Is what you do living, working, aging, watching everything you love fade and die? We offer forever. Forever's too long," I heard myself say. "That's why it hurts. That's why you take children, because they don't know that yet. They think they want to play forever, but forever isn't a gift. It's a prison." The fog rippled, like I'd thrown a stone into still water. The children's smiles flickered, just for a second. I saw what was underneath. Tired. So impossibly tired. Empty things going through motions they'd forgotten the meaning of. Playing games with no end. No winner, no point, just endless, mindless repetition. Forever and ever and ever. You can't have them. Katie pulled out her phone, showed them a picture, her daughter. Bright and laughing and alive. "You can't have any more. We know what you are now. We'll tell everyone. We'll make them believe." The little boy tilted his head. "Will you?" Who believes children about monsters? Who believed you? He was right. Of course he was right. But Katie smiled, and it was fierce. It was protective. It was everything those things could never understand. They'll believe mothers, she said. The fog pulled back, not much, just an inch. But it pulled back. We'll wait, the little boy said. We have all the time in the world. And children are always curious about fog. They faded, melted back into ordinary mist that dissipated in the morning sun. But I could feel them. Still there, still waiting, still hungry. We went to the police, to the FBI, to anyone who would listen. Most didn't, but some did. Parents who'd noticed purple fog, teachers who'd heard chiming sounds, kids who talked about voices calling them to play. There's a network now, quiet, unofficial. People who watch the weather reports, who text warnings when fog rolls in wrong, who know to keep their children inside, who understand that some games should never be played. But it's not enough, it'll never be enough, because the fog comes when it wants, takes who it wants, and we can't stop it. We can only warn, only watch, only remember. So if you're listening to this, if you've made it this far, remember these rules. Never follow voices in the fog. Never trust a path that shouldn't be there. Never look too long at children who smile too wide. And never, ever, think it can't happen where you are. Because I thought that too. For 40 years, I thought I was safe, thought it was over. But they don't forget. They wait, patient as stones, inevitable as morning mist. Last night, I looked out my window, and there was fog creeping across my lawn, purple-black and familiar. I could hear the chiming starting. Soft, almost musical, almost beautiful. I'm 62 years old, a grandmother, a teacher, a survivor. But when I hear that sound, I'm 12 again, watching my best friend almost walk into forever. The fog is pressing against my windows now. I can see shapes in it. Small shapes, child shapes. They're singing that nursery rhyme, round and round the foggy path. The children chase the morning. Careful, or you'll lose your laugh. And wake up never yawning. I should run, pack everything, leave tonight. But I'm tired of running, tired of watching, tired of being afraid. Maybe that's how they get you in the end, not by force, not by trickery, but by exhaustion. By wearing you down until forever doesn't seem so bad. Until anything seems better than the waiting. My phone's ringing, unknown number. But I know who it is. It's them. It's always been them. Calling to say it's time. That they've been patient long enough. That the game is finally ending. Or beginning. I won't answer, not yet. But I'm looking at that fog, and I'm thinking about Jenny Patterson, about Marcus Webb, about all those children trapped in their endless playground. And I'm wondering if I went with them, if I finally walked that black glass path, could I bring them back? Could I end there forever? Or would I just become another voice in the fog, another smile that's too wide, another child who never comes home? The chiming's getting louder. My doorknob is turning. Slowly. So slowly. I have to make a choice. We all do, eventually. Face the fog or hide from it. Fight it or join it. Save others or save yourself. The door is opening, and I still don't know what I'm going to choose, but whatever happens. Remember this story. Share it. Spread it. Make people listen. Because somewhere, right now, a child is looking out their window at fog that shouldn't be purple, hearing sounds that shouldn't exist, fighting a curiosity that might kill them, or worse, much worse. The door is wide open now, the fog is pouring in. It smells like October mornings and apple pancakes and everything I've lost, everything I've been running from. And in it, Tommy and Katie are standing there, 12 years old again, smiling those two wide smiles. Come on, Sarah, they say with voices like breaking glass. Don't you want to play? I close my eyes, take a breath, make my choice, and if you never hear from me again, if this story is all that's left, then you'll know what I chose. You'll know why. And maybe, just maybe, you'll know to choose differently. Watch the fog, protect the children. Remember our names: Sarah Mitchell, Tommy Chen, Katie Morrison. We were real. We were here, we mattered. And if the fog comes for you, if you hear the chime-in and see the path, run, run fast, run far, and whatever you do, whatever those voices promise, don't look back, don't ever look back, because some games never end. They just wait for new players. Story number 3. The smell hit me first. Not the usual musty wood or forgotten spices, but fresh-baked cookies, chocolate chip, from a cabinet I hadn't opened in 3 years. I'm telling you this because I need someone to believe me, because right now, as I'm recording this, I can hear footsteps in my kitchen, and they're not mine. But let me back up, let me tell you how it started. Maybe then you'll understand why I can't leave, why I'm trapped here, watching, waiting. The story begins now. I inherited the house from my Aunt Meredith last spring. A modest 2-story colonial in Burlington, Vermont. Nothing special from the outside. White siding, black shutters, the kind of place that blends into every suburban neighborhood from here to California. The realtor called it charming. I called it free housing. The kitchen hadn't been updated since the 70s. Harvest gold appliances, dark wood cabinets that stretched from floor to ceiling, and this weird layout where some cabinets seemed to go deeper than they should. Physics didn't quite add up, but I figured it was just clever carpentry from back when people built things to last. I'd been living there for 2 months when it happened. Tuesday night, October, I was making pasta. Nothing fancy, when I reached for the oregano in the spice cabinet. My hand hit the back wall and it wasn't solid. It gave way, like pushing through a thick curtain. I yanked my hand back so fast I knocked over the salt. What the? I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and peered inside. The back of the cabinet wasn't there. Instead, there was depth, space that shouldn't exist, and that smell, those cookies, stronger now. You know that feeling when you're at the top of the stairs in the dark, and you're not sure if there's one more step. That vertigo moment where your body doesn't trust what your eyes can't see. That's what looking into that cabinet felt like. My kitchen was a tidy 12 by 15 feet. This cabinet was mounted on an exterior wall. There should have been insulation, siding. Then my side yard. Instead, there was a tunnel, not a proper tunnel, more like a throat. The wood grain of my cabinet gradually shifted, morphed, became something else. Someone else's cabinet, different wood, different stain. And way back, maybe 3 feet in, I could see light, warm yellow light, kitchen light, but not my kitchen light. I stood there for, I don't know how long, phone in one hand, pasta boiling over on the stove behind me. The rational part of my brain was screaming at me to shut the cabinet, call someone, hell, call everyone. But the curious part, the part that slows down to look at car accidents, that part was winning. The smell of burning pasta finally snapped me back. I slammed the cabinet shut, dealt with the mess, and spent the rest of the night sitting at my kitchen table, watching those cabinets, waiting for something. Nothing happened. By morning, I'd almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Stress from the move, grief from losing Aunt Meredith, the brain playing tricks. I made coffee, avoiding that particular cabinet, and tried to go about my day. But you can't unsee something like that. By noon, I was back in the kitchen. This time, I came prepared. Flashlight, tape measure, my phone recording everything. I opened other cabinets first, normal. Solid backs, containing exactly what cabinets should contain. Dishes, canned goods, that collection of plastic containers that never quite match their lids. Then, the spice cabinet. My hand shook as I reached for the handle. The door creaked open and... solid wood. Normal cabinet, no tunnel, no impossible space. Just wood and my half-empty spice rack. I actually laughed. Felt the tension drain out of my shoulders. Stress had to be stress. I was about to close it when I noticed the oregano was gone. The bottle I'd been reaching for last night. Gone. I emptied the entire cabinet. Checked behind every bottle, every tin. Nothing. It was just gone. That's when I noticed the scratch marks. Fresh gouges in the wood, right where my hand had pushed through. Like something had clawed its way shut from the other side. I started keeping a journal. Had to. Things were happening too fast, too strange. And I needed to track it all. Make sense of the senseless. October 15th. The spice cabinet opened again. 10:47 p.m. This time I saw more. A kitchen. Definitely a kitchen. But not modern. Vintage. Like stepping into a 1950s advertisement. Mint green appliances, checkered floor, and a woman. Just her back. Mixing something in a yellow bowl. She was humming. The moment I shifted to get a better look, the connection severed. Cabinet back to normal. October 17th. Different cabinet. The one above the refrigerator. The one I never use. Opened it for the first time since moving in and nearly fell off my step stool. Another kitchen, contemporary this time. Sleek, minimalist, all whites and grays. Empty, but I could hear a TV somewhere, news. Something about a storm coming. I reached in, just a little, and my finger touched cold granite. Someone else's countertop, in someone else's house. October 20th, 3 cabinets now, 3 different kitchens. The pattern was becoming clear, only at night, only when I was alone, and only kitchens, always kitchens. Like my cabinets were doors, windows, ports into other people's lives. I tried to be scientific about it, measured the spaces, took photos, videos. But here's the thing about impossible things, they don't photograph well. The videos showed exactly what you'd expect. Me, staring into perfectly normal cabinets, talking to myself about tunnels and other kitchens. I looked insane. Maybe I was... October 25th changed everything. I was ready this time, had my laptop set up, multiple cameras, even borrowed some equipment from my friend Jake, told him I was starting a YouTube channel about home renovation mysteries, not entirely a lie. The cabinet under the sink started humming at 11:15 p.m., not mechanical humming, musical, like someone humming a lullaby. I dropped to my knees, opened the doors, and froze. A child's drawing was taped to the inside of someone else's cabinet. Crayon stick figures. My family scrawled across the top in uneven letters, and at the bottom, in neater handwriting. Sarah, age 6. But that wasn't what made my blood run cold. In the background of this other kitchen, taped to what I could see of a refrigerator, was another drawing. Same style, same crayons. But this one said, "Dear Sarah, please come home." I reached for my phone, hands shaking, trying to capture this. As I leaned in, something shifted. The angle changed and I could see more of that other kitchen. Modern, tidy, but wrong. Every surface was covered in missing posters, the same little girl's face, over and over. Sarah Martinez. Age 6, missing since... The date hit me like ice water. 3 days from now. October 28th, 2024. She'd been missing since 3 days in the future. The cabinet slammed shut so hard it rattled every dish in my kitchen. When I tried to open it again, solid wood, normal cabinet. The humming had stopped, but I couldn't stop thinking about those posters, about that date, about a little girl who hadn't gone missing yet. I didn't sleep that night or the next. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that kitchen. Those posters, that impossible date. I tried to rationalize it. Different time zones, different calendar, but I knew, deep down I knew. I was looking through time as well as space. October 27th. One day before Sarah Martinez would go missing, I camped out in my kitchen. Waited. The cabinet under the sink stayed stubbornly normal all day. But that night, 11:15 again. The humming returned. This time, I was ready. I'd practiced what I'd say, how I'd warn them, save her. Soon as that cabinet opened, I started shouting, "Hello, can you hear me? Please, listen. Your daughter, Sarah, you need to." The humming stopped. The kitchen beyond went silent. Then, slowly, someone approached. Not the parents, not an adult. Sarah, 6 years old, curly black hair, gap-toothed smile. Exactly like the posters. She crouched down, peered into the cabinet, into my cabinet, and giggled. "Funny lady," she said. "Are you the cabinet fairy?" My heart shattered. She was right there, close enough to touch, close enough to save. I reached out, slowly, carefully. "Sarah, honey, you need to tell your parents." She reached out too. Our fingers were inches apart, almost touching. Almost. Something yanked her backward, hard. She yelped, disappeared from view, and the cabinet slammed shut. This time, I heard locks engaging, bolts sliding home. Not on my side, on theirs. October 28th came and went. I watched the news obsessively. Checked every missing persons database, nothing. No Sarah Martinez. No missing 6-year-old. Either I'd changed something, or I was losing my mind. Maybe both, but the cabinets didn't stop. If anything, they got worse. More frequent, more invasive, and I started noticing things, patterns, rules. Rule 1. You can look, but you can't touch. Every time I tried to reach through, to make contact, the connection severed, violently. Rule 2. They can see you too. Started catching glimpses of people noticing. Pausing. Staring at their cabinets with the same confusion I felt. One woman actually screamed. Threw a plate at her cabinet. It shattered against wood that should have been my face. Rule 3. Time isn't linear. I saw the same kitchen at different times. Watched a family age in reverse. Saw renovations undone. Wallpaper peeling backward onto walls. And once, just once, I saw my own kitchen from the outside looking in. But it wasn't me standing at the counter. It was Aunt Meredith. Young, alive, staring straight at me with eyes that knew too much. Rule 4. Some doors are meant to stay closed. That last rule? I learned that the hard way. November 1st. The cabinet above the stove had been quiet all week, solid, normal. I'd almost forgotten about it. Should have left it alone. But I was mapping the connections, trying to understand the logic, the geography of impossible spaces. I opened it at 2 a.m. Don't ask me why that time. Just felt right or wrong, depending on how you look at it. The kitchen on the other side was dark. Not middle of the night dark, abandoned dark. I could see enough to make out shapes. Retro appliances, dust-covered surfaces, a calendar on the wall. 1987, November. Every day X'd out except November 1st. Today. 37 years ago. Today. I leaned in, flashlight sweeping the space. Everything was exactly as someone had left it. Coffee mug on the counter. Newspaper half read. Breakfast dishes in the sink like whoever lived there had just stopped. That's when I saw the other cabinets. Open. All of them. Every door hanging wide. And through each one, darkness. Not the darkness of empty cabinets. The darkness of depth. Of spaces that went on forever. I started to pull back, but something caught my eye. Movement. In one of those open cabinets, I angled my flashlight and eyes. Dozens of them, reflecting back at me from the depths of someone else's cabinets. Watching. Waiting. Human eyes, animal eyes, eyes that shouldn't exist, all focused on me. One blinked. I slammed the cabinet so hard the door cracked. Stuffed towels in the gap. Duct taped it shut. but I could still feel them. Those eyes, watching through wood and space and time. That's when I understood. I wasn't the first to find these passages, and whoever lived in that 1987 kitchen, they'd made the mistake of leaving their doors open. All of them, at once. I wondered if they were still in there, somewhere. In the dark? Looking for a way home. November 5th. I'd taped half my cabinet shut by then. The house looked like a paranoid's fever dream. But I couldn't stop checking the others. Couldn't stop looking. It was like a compulsion. An addiction. Each peek into someone else's life, someone else's kitchen. It fed something in me. Curiosity, loneliness, the very human need to connect. The cabinet next to the dishwasher showed me a kitchen in Texas. Could tell by the decor, the massive "Bless This Mess" sign, the boots by the door. An elderly man was making coffee. Slow, methodical. Same routine I'd watched for 3 days straight. 5:43 a.m., like clockwork. Except this morning, he paused, turned, looked straight at his cabinet, at me, and smiled. "Mornin', neighbor," he said, clear as day. "Been wondering when you'd say hello." I nearly fell off my chair. He could see me, had been seeing me, and he was okay with it. How long have you known?" He chuckled. Poured his coffee. "Since Tuesday. Figured you were just shy. Martha was the same way. Took her weeks to work up the courage." "Martha? Previous tenant, your side. Nice lady, used to share recipes through the dinner plate cabinet." My blood chilled. "Aunt Meredith?" His face softened. "That her name? I'm sorry. She stopped coming around about 6 months back. Maybe 7? I figured she'd moved." "She died 8 months ago." "Yeah," I managed. "She moved." He nodded. Sipped his coffee. "Well, you ever need anything, cup of sugar, someone to talk to, just knock. Name's Bill. But the connection was already fading. The cabinet returning to normal. I sat there, staring at solid wood, wondering how many others knew. How many were watching, waiting, living with this impossible reality. How many were like Bill, friendly, human, harmless, and how many were like whatever lived in that 1987 kitchen. 2 weeks. That's how long I lasted before I cracked. 2 weeks of peeping into other people's lives, of rules and patterns and impossible geometry, of friendly neighbors and missing children and eyes in the darkness. 2 weeks before, I did the stupidest thing imaginable. I went through. It was Bill's fault. Or maybe credit, depends on how you look at it. He'd become my morning routine. 5:43 a.m., coffee, chat. The only normal thing in my increasingly abnormal life. We talked about everything. Weather, sports, the weirdness of our connection. He told me about his wife, passed 3 years back. I told him about Aunt Meredith, about inheriting the house, the loneliness. "You should come visit," he said one morning. "Got fresh kolaches from the bakery." "I can't. Rule number 1, no touching, no crossing over." He frowned. "Who told you that?" "No one. I just learned. Every time I try, the connection breaks." "Huh." He sipped his coffee, thoughtful. "Martha came through all the time. Borrowed my stand mixer once. Still have it somewhere." My heart stuttered. "She came through? Physically?" "Sure. Trick is intention. Can't be grabby about it. Gotta be invited. Gotta be, what's the word? Reciprocal." He held out his hand. Steady, patient, inviting. "Come on, neighbor. Coffee's getting cold." I stared at that hand. Weathered. Liver spots, completely normal, completely impossible. Every instinct screamed at me to slam the cabinet, tape it shut, run. Instead, I reached back. Our fingers touched, solid, real, warm. The cabinet didn't slam. The connection didn't break. Bill smiled, gripped, gently, and pulled. Moving through was like being borne backward, pressure. Disorientation, the sensation of being too big and too small simultaneously. My kitchen stretched, twisted, became a tunnel of wood grain and impossible angles. For a moment, I existed in two places at once. Two kitchens, two realities. Then, pop. I stumbled into Bill's kitchen, solid ground, Texas heat, the smell of coffee and kolaches. Real, all of it real. "There we go," Bill said, steadying me. "First time's always rough. You'll get used to it." I was too stunned to speak, just stood there, in someone else's kitchen, in Texas, having traveled through a cabinet from Vermont. The impossibility of it made my knees weak. "Sit," Bill said, guiding me to a chair. "Breathe, let your brain catch up." He poured coffee, set out plates, acted like this was perfectly normal, like people popped through his cabinets every day. "How?" I finally managed. "How is this possible?" He shrugged. "Beats me. Martha had theories, something about thin places, quantum something or other. I just know it works, always has, long as you follow the rules." "Which rules?" "I've been making them up as I go. The real rules, not the ones fear teaches you." He counted on his fingers. 1. Only kitchens connect to kitchens. 2. Both sides gotta be willing. 3. Don't leave doors open unattended. 4. Never force a connection. 5. He paused, face darkening. 5, I prompted. 5. Some kitchens are traps. Some doors are one way, and some things that look like kitchens aren't. The coffee turned to ash in my mouth. The 1987 kitchen. You've seen it, not a question. Martha warned me about that one. Said she lost someone to it. Someone who got curious. Went exploring without understanding. Never came back. Who? But I already knew, the way he wouldn't meet my eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly. Your wife. He nodded. Silent. We sat there, two strangers connected by impossible cabinets and shared loss. The kolaches cooled between us. "How do I get home?" I asked eventually. "Same way you came, just backward. Your cabinet's still open. Can feel the draft from here." He was right. I could sense it, a pull, a wrongness in the air, my cabinet, my kitchen, waiting for me. I stood, paused. "Bill? Why didn't you warn me about coming through?" He smiled. Sad, tired. "Because you needed to choose. Fear or trust. Isolation or connection. Can't live your whole life peeking through cabinets. Gotta pick a side eventually." The journey back was easier, like my body remembered the way. I tumbled into my kitchen, disoriented but intact. The cabinet swung shut behind me, gentle, natural. I sat on my floor. Processing, I'd done it, crossed over, broken my own rules, and survived. But Bill's words haunted me. Some kitchens are traps. Some doors are one way, some things that look like kitchens aren't. What else was out there? What else was watching? Waiting? And why? Why did it have to be kitchens? I got my answer 3 days later, 3 a.m., woken by a sound I'd never heard before. Not humming, not creaking, knocking. From inside the cabinets, all of them. At once, I crept to the kitchen. Every cabinet door was rattling, shaking, like something was trying to get out, or in. The knocking grew louder, urgent, desperate. Then, voices. "Hello? Is someone there? Please, we can see your light. Help us. The doors won't open. We've been walking for so long. Please." Different voices, different accents, men, women. Some sounded young, too young, all desperate, all coming from inside my cabinets. I reached for the nearest handle, stopped. Bill's 5th rule echoing in my head. Some things that look like kitchens aren't. "Who are you?" I called out. The knocking stopped. Silence. Then a child's voice, familiar, too familiar. "It's me, Sarah, the cabinet fairy, remember?" You tried to warn me about something. I'm sorry I ran away. Can you help me find my mommy? My blood froze. Sarah Martinez, the girl who may or may not have gone missing, speaking from inside my cabinets. But wrong. The voice was off, like someone doing an impression. Close, but not quite. Sarah? What's your mommy's name? Pause. Too long. Mommy, the voice said finally. Uncertain. Her name is Mommy, not Sarah. Something pretending to be Sarah. Something that had heard our brief interaction was using it. The knocking resumed, harder, violent. The cabinet doors bulging outward. Whatever was in there, it was done being polite. Let us in. Multiple voices now, screaming, demanding. The cabinet doors splintering, cracking, about to give way. I did the only thing I could think of. Grabbed the fire extinguisher. Started spraying. Not at flames, at the growing gaps in the cabinet doors. The foam hissed, expanded, sealed the cracks. Bought me seconds. The voices changed, no longer human. Chittering, clicking, sounds that hurt to hear. My cabinets were coming apart, all of them, all at once. And through the gaps, darkness, moving darkness, with eyes, so many eyes. I ran, grabbed my keys, my phone, nothing else. Hit the front door at a sprint. Behind me, the sound of wood exploding, of things pouring out, of my kitchen becoming something else. I made it to my car, locked the doors, looked back at my house, Aunt Meredith's house, and watched shadows move behind the windows. Shapes that weren't quite right. Too tall, too angular, too many limbs. One, pressed against the kitchen window, stared out at me. It had Bill's face, Bill's smile, but wrong. Stretched. Like someone wearing a mask that didn't quite fit. It waved. I drove. Fast. Far. Didn't stop until I crossed state lines. Checked into a motel. Tried to make sense of what happened. Failed. But here's the thing that made me start recording this. The thing that's kept me up for 3 nights straight. The motel has a kitchenette. And an hour ago, I heard humming coming from the cabinet under the sink. They follow me. The connections. The passages. Every kitchen I enter becomes infected, linked, part of the network. I've tried hotels, apartments, even camping. Doesn't matter. Soon as I'm near a kitchen, any kitchen, the humming starts. I can't cook, can't eat, can't live any kind of normal life because I know what's out there, what's trying to break through, using our most human space, our kitchens, as doorways. Sometimes it's Bill, real Bill, warning me, helping me, teaching me how to spot the false ones, the trap kitchens, the things pretending to be human. Sometimes it's others, like me, people who found the passages, who use them, some trapped, some exploring, some hiding from things worse than shadow creatures with too many eyes. And sometimes it's them, the ones from the 1987 kitchen, getting smarter, better at mimicking, better at luring. They've learned our voices, our faces, our stories. They're patient, they're hungry, and they're spreading. So that's my story. That's why I'm sitting in this motel room, watching a cabinet door start to crack open, recording this message because someone needs to know. Someone needs to understand. Check your kitchen cabinets, really check them. Push on the backs, listen for humming, watch for movement. Most will be normal, solid, safe, but some won't. Some lead to other kitchens, other houses, other worlds, and once you see it, once you know it's there, you can't unsee it, can't unknow it, can't go back to normal. The cabinet is fully open now. I can see my kitchen, my real kitchen, waiting for me, empty, inviting, like nothing happened, like I could just step through and go home. But there's something wrong with the shadows, something moving in them, something smiling. With too many teeth, I have to make a choice. Stay here, keep running. Hope they get bored, give up. Move on to easier prey. Or go back. Face whatever's taken over my home, my aunt's home. Learn the real rules, all of them. Maybe find a way to close the passages, seal the doors, save others from this. The shadows are reaching out now, beckoning, patient. They know I'll come eventually. We all do, back to our kitchens, our homes, our hearts. Because that's what kitchens are, aren't they? The heart of a home, where families gather, where memories are made, where the warmth lives, where the monsters know to wait. If you're listening to this, if you made it this far, do me a favor. Share it, spread the word. Let others know what to look for, what to avoid. Maybe you'll save someone, maybe you'll doom them to curiosity. Either way, they should know. We all should know. What's hiding in our cabinets, what's waiting in our walls, what's watching from the other side of ordinary. Check your kitchen, but be careful what you find. Be careful what finds you, because once the doors are open, once the connections are made, there's no going back. Trust me, I know, I'm going through now, back to my kitchen, back to whatever's waiting. If you don't hear from me again, well, you know why. The humming has started again, different cabinet this time. Sounds like laughter, no, singing. A child's voice, clear, sweet, wrong. Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies. Not Sarah, never was Sarah. Ashes, ashes. The shadow is smiling wider, too wide, impossibly wide. We all fall down. I'm going through, I have to. It's the only way to know, the only way to end this or begin it. Tell my story, share it, save others, or doom them. Your choice, like it was mine. Like it's always been. Since the first kitchen, since the first door, since the first curious soul pushed a little too hard and found something pushing back. The singing is getting louder. Time to go, time to see, time to choose. Check your cabinets, but don't say I didn't warn you. Don't say you didn't know, because now you do, and they know you know. They're probably already watching, waiting, humming, in your walls, in your cabinets, in your kitchen, right now. Recording ends. Story number 4. The car shouldn't be rolling uphill, but it is. I'm sitting here in my beat-up Honda Civic, engine off, transmission in neutral, watching my dashboard Jesus bobblehead nod frantically as we slowly, impossibly, roll backward. Up the hill, against every law of physics I learned in Mr. Henderson's science class back in Riverside High. My hands are shaking. Not from the October cold seeping through the cracked weather stripping. Not from the 3 Red Bulls I crushed during the drive from Phoenix. They're shaking because 15 minutes ago I was just another true crime podcast junkie looking for content. Now I don't know what I am, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you why you should never, ever drive down Gravity Hill. Especially not alone. Especially not at 3 a.m. And especially not when the locals in that dusty gas station warn you 3 times to turn around. 2 days ago, I was scrolling through Reddit at 2 a.m. like any other insomniac millennial. You know how it goes. 1 minute, you're watching cat videos. The next, you're deep in some obscure thread about America's weirdest roadside attractions. That's when I found it. A post with only 17 upvotes buried in our high strangeness. Pennsylvania's Gravity Hill, the road where physics dies. The poster, username throwra_physics, claimed they'd visited this spot near New Paris, a stretch of road where cars roll uphill, water flows backward, and locals refuse to drive there after dark. Classic internet nonsense, right? Except the comments. Person after person confirming it, sharing coordinates, warning others to stay away. One comment stopped me cold. My grandfather helped pave that road in 1954. He never talked about what they found when they dug up the old path, just said some things should stay buried. I should have closed my laptop, should have gone to bed. Instead, I opened Google Maps. Gravity Hill, McKinney Road, just off Route 96, real place, real road, 3 hours and 47 minutes from my apartment. The thing about being a content creator, you're always hunting for the next video. My channel, Midnight Drives and Urban Legends, had been stuck at 47,000 subscribers for months. I needed something fresh, something real, something that would make people hit that notification bell. So I packed my camera gear, grabbed my emergency kit, and hit the road at midnight. The plan was simple. Drive there, film the mysterious optical illusion, debunk it with science, and have a new video edited by the weekend. I had no idea what was waiting for me on that hill. The drive started normal enough. Interstate 10 to Route 60, windows down, playlist on shuffle. 21 Pilots transitioned to Billie Eilish as Phoenix disappeared in my rearview mirror. The desert gave way to scattered pines. City lights faded to darkness, punctuated by the occasional truck stop. Around 2 a.m., I stopped for gas in Claysburg, one of those towns that feels frozen in 1987. You know the type. Wood-paneled station wagons, hand-painted signs. That weird, small-town silence that makes you whisper even though no one's around. The gas station attendant, an older guy with a John Deere cap and hands like leather, watched me punch the Gravity Hill address into my GPS. "You heading up to McKinney Road?" His voice had that careful tone people use when they're trying not to sound crazy. "Yeah, making a video about the optical illusion. You know, for YouTube." He stopped cleaning the counter. Just stopped, like someone had hit pause on him. "Listen, miss, I've lived here 43 years. Seen plenty of folks go up that hill with cameras and theories. Most come back talking about angles and perception. But some," he glanced at the clock, 2:17 a.m. "Some don't talk about what they saw at all." I laughed it off. Had to. That's what you do when locals try to spook tourists. "Thanks for the warning, but I've got a skeptical audience to satisfy." He rang up my Red Bull and beef jerky without another word. But as I walked to my car, he called out, "If you do go, don't turn your engine off on the hill, and whatever you see in your mirrors, don't look for too long." Classic small-town theater, right? Except, his hands were shaking when he handed me my receipt, and I'm pretty sure I saw him mouth a prayer as I drove away. The last 20 minutes of the drive took me through woods so thick, my headlights could only penetrate about 15 feet ahead. No streetlights, no houses, just trees pressing in from both sides like curious spectators. My GPS kept recalculating, the signal flickering in and out. "In 800 feet, turn right." But there was no right turn, just more trees, more darkness. Then I saw it. A small gravel turnoff I would have missed if not for the faded yellow sign, "McKinney Road, no maintenance beyond this point." The moment my tires hit that gravel, something felt different. You know that feeling when you're on a plane and your ears need to pop? Like that, but in my whole body, a pressure change, a shift. The road curved upward, then dipped into a hollow before rising again. According to my research, the gravity anomaly happened in that dip. The spot where the road appeared to slope down but was actually sloping up. An optical illusion caused by the surrounding landscape. Simple, explainable, safe. I parked at what looked like the bottom of the hill and killed the engine. The silence hit me like a physical thing. No insects, no wind. Just my breathing and the tick-tick-tick of my cooling engine. Time to test the famous phenomenon. I shifted into neutral, foot off the brake, and nothing. The car sat still. Of course. Because gravity is gravity and hills are... The car moved, backward. Slowly at first, like someone was gently pushing from the front. But I was alone. Completely alone on a dark road at 3 a.m., and my car was rolling uphill. My speedometer crept up. 2 miles per hour, 5 miles per hour, 8 miles per hour. I grabbed my camera, hands fumbling with the night vision setting. Okay, guys, this is absolutely wild. I'm in neutral, no gas, and we're literally rolling uphill. The locals claim it's supernatural, but there's got to be a scientific... That's when I saw the first one in my rearview mirror. A figure, standing in the road about 50 feet behind me. Just standing there, tall, too tall. Arms hanging at wrong angles like a scarecrow someone hadn't assembled quite right. I whipped around. Nothing, empty road, back to the mirror. Still there. Closer now. Maybe 30 feet, my rational brain kicked in. Pareidolia. My mind creating patterns in the darkness. Tree branches and shadows forming human shapes. Except, it waved, slow, deliberate, like it knew I was watching. I slammed the car into drive and floored it. The Honda lurched forward, tires spinning on gravel. In my mirror, the figure didn't chase. It just tilted its head like a confused dog. Then it stepped sideways and vanished. Not into the woods, not behind a tree, it just wasn't there anymore. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely keep the car on the road, but I had to go back. Had to get the footage. 47,000 subscribers were counting on me to deliver something real. So I did the stupidest thing possible. I turned around. This time, I set up properly. Camera on the dashboard, backup camera on a tripod outside. Full documentation, scientific method. I even brought out my level to prove the road's actual incline. All right, take 2. I'm back at the bottom, or what appears to be the bottom, of Gravity Hill. That weird experience earlier was just my imagination running wild. Happens to everyone in creepy places at night. Power of suggestion and all that. I was talking to the camera, but really, I was trying to convince myself. Engine off, neutral gear, parking brake released. The roll started immediately this time, faster, more insistent, like the hill was eager to show off. This is incredible. We're moving at, Jesus, 12 miles per hour now, completely defying. I glanced at the mirror and my words died. 3 figures this time, different sizes. The tall one from before in the middle, a shorter one that moved in stuttering jerks like a broken film reel, and a third that, God, I don't know how to describe it. It was human-shaped but wrong. Like someone had tried to draw a person from memory but kept getting the proportions off. They weren't just standing anymore, they were walking, matching my speed exactly, getting closer. 20 feet, 15, 10. I could see details now. The tall one's face was... It had too many angles, like a cubist painting. Features that didn't line up. An eye where its temple should be. Mouth vertical instead of horizontal. The short one's movements. Imagine a YouTube video glitching, jumping from frame to frame. 1 second its arm was down. Next second, reaching toward my car. No motion in between. But the third one was the worst, because it looked normal, completely, perfectly normal. Suburban dad, normal. Polo shirt and khakis normal. Until you noticed it wasn't walking, it was sliding, gliding along the road like it was on invisible rails. And its smile. Humans can't smile that wide. Our faces won't stretch that far. I grabbed the gear shift, ready to drive away when my car suddenly stopped rolling. Not gradually, instantly, like hitting an invisible wall. The figures stopped too, all 3. Standing in a perfect line across the road behind me. Waiting. My camera was still recording. Had to be. This was it, the video that would explode my channel. Proof of something. I just had to turn around, get them on the main camera, show the world that Gravity Hill wasn't just an optical illusion. I turned, empty road, nothing but asphalt and darkness. Back to the mirror, still there. The normal-looking one raised its hand, pointed at me, then at the woods, then at me again. Then it opened its mouth, that impossible mouth, and I swear to God, I heard it whisper through my closed windows. You're recording this wrong. The car lurched, not forward or backward, sideways, like something massive had slammed into the driver's side, but there was nothing there, just air and physics breaking down. Another impact, passenger side. The Honda rocked like a boat in a storm. The whisper came again from all 3 figures now, harmonizing in a way that made my teeth ache. Some things shouldn't be recorded, some roads don't want witnesses. My dashboard camera sparked. Actual sparks. The lens cracked with a sound like breaking bones. The tripod outside toppled over, and I heard the expensive crash of my backup camera hitting pavement. That's when the rolling started again. But not backward this time, forward, down the hill. Except, was it down? My inner ear said up, my eyes said down. My speedometer climbed. 20, 30, 40. The figures in my mirror weren't walking anymore, they were running. Keeping pace, getting closer. And there were more now. Dozens, all wrong, all broken, all smiling those impossible smiles. I jammed both feet on the brake, nothing. Pumped them, still nothing. Emergency brake, useless. 50 miles per hour, 60. The Honda was screaming. RPMs redlining even though the engine was off. How was the engine off but the tachometer showing 8,000 revolutions per minute? The whispers became roars. You weren't supposed to come back. You weren't supposed to record. You weren't supposed to see. Then, silence. Complete, absolute silence. And I was parked at the bottom of the hill again. Engine running normally, cameras intact, like the last 5 minutes hadn't happened, except the clock on my dash. When I turned around, it said 3:27 a.m. Now, 3:27 a.m., same exact time. Either my clock was broken, or I looked in the mirror one more time. Just one figure now. The normal-looking one. It wasn't smiling anymore. It looked sad, disappointed, like a teacher whose student had failed a crucial test. It held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. Then my engine died. I turned the key, nothing, not even a click. Battery dead, alternator fried, electronics toast, my phone. Black screen, camera, won't power on. I was trapped in a dead car on a haunted road with things that shouldn't exist closing in. But here's the thing about modern cars. They're never completely dead. There's always some residual power. Emergency systems, backup batteries. So when my radio suddenly crackled to life, static filling the cabin, I nearly jumped through the roof. Through the white noise, voices emerged. Faint, distant. Like tuning into a station from another state. 3rd one this month. When will people learn? They never learn. They come with their cameras and their skepticism, thinking they'll be the ones to solve it. Remember the documentary crew in '98, or the physicist in 2003. He had all those instruments, thought he could measure the anomaly. They always think it's about gravity, never realize gravity is just the symptom. The voices were having a conversation. About me, about everyone who'd come before, and they sounded bored, like workers discussing another day at the office. I tried the door handle, locked, not stuck, not jammed, locked from the outside. Windows wouldn't budge. I was sealed in. The radio voices continued. This one's persistent, though. Came back after the first warning. Youth, they think they're invincible. Should we show her? Might as well. She's already seen too much. The dashboard Jesus bobblehead started nodding. Slow at first, then faster. Then so fast its little plastic head was a blur. The whole car began to vibrate, not like an engine running. Like every molecule was trying to shake apart. Then the world folded. I don't know how else to describe it. Reality creased like paper. The road ahead bent upward at an impossible angle. The trees twisted into spirals. The sky, there were too many stars. Constellations that hadn't been there before. Patterns that hurt to perceive. And through it all, my car kept rolling. Not on the road anymore. On something else. Some other surface that existed between the asphalt and the air. Like driving on the edge of a knife between 2 different realities. The figures weren't in my mirrors anymore. They were alongside the car, walking casually. Close enough that I could see details I wished I couldn't. The tall one's skin wasn't skin. It was something that pretended to be skin. Something that had learned about humans from old photographs and got the texture wrong. The short one moved between its glitches, and in those frozen moments, I saw it was hollow, like a paper doll, three-dimensional but with nothing inside. For the normal one, it walked right up to my window, tapped on the glass with a perfectly manicured finger. Its suburban dad face smiled that too-wide smile, and it spoke, not whispered. Spoke in a voice like a McDonald's drive-thru speaker, distorted but understandable. You want to know what Gravity Hill is? You want your content? Your views? Your subscribers? It laughed, and the sound was like ice cubes in a blender. We are what happens when a road becomes aware, when asphalt dreams, when the white lines develop opinions about the things that travel over them. My speedometer was doing things speedometers shouldn't do. Negative numbers, letters, symbols I didn't recognize. The odometer ran backward, erasing miles I'd driven years ago. In 1954, the thing continued, walking easily alongside my impossibly moving car. They dug up an old road to pave this one. Know what they found underneath? Another road, and under that, another. 7 layers deep, roads all the way down, each one older than the last. The bottom one, it wasn't made for cars, wasn't made for horses, wasn't made for anything that's existed for the last 10,000 years. The world kept folding. I saw my car from outside my car, saw myself gripping the wheel, saw myself seeing myself. An infinite recursion of observation that made my brain feel like it was leaking out my ears. We're not ghosts, the short one said, its voice glitching like its movement. Not demons, not aliens. We're what happens when infrastructure develops consciousness. When the things humans build to connect places decide they don't want to connect anymore. They want to select. The tall one leaned down. 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 Its face stretching like taffy until it was level with my window. Every road has rules, speed limits, traffic laws, but this road makes its own rules. And rule number 1? Some people don't get to leave. My car stopped. Not slowed, stopped. But the sensation of movement continued, like when you get off a treadmill and the world keeps sliding. We were back at the bottom of the hill, or the top. Direction didn't mean anything anymore. All 3 figures stood in front of my car now. The normal one stepped forward, reached through my windshield, through it, like the glass was water, and touched my camera. The device sparked back to life. Recording, the red light blinked like a heartbeat. Here's your content, it said. Your viral video, your 1 million views. But there's a price. The road chooses who tells its story, and how much they remember. Some people drive away from Gravity Hill with a fun story about optical illusions. Some people... It trailed off, smiled. That impossible smile. Some people drive away different than they arrived, missing pieces, memories that don't quite fit, dreams about roads that go nowhere, and every night when they close their eyes, they're back here, rolling uphill, forever. The world unfolded. Reality snapped back like a rubber band. I was in my car, engine running, cameras working. The clock read 3:28 a.m. 1 minute had passed. 1 impossible minute. I drove away, had to, every instinct screaming to get distance between me and that place. But as I reached the main road, I looked in the mirror one last time. They were gone. Except there was something in the back seat. A note, handwritten in perfect Palmer script. Thank you for visiting Gravity Hill. Your footage has been edited for optimal viewing experience. Please remember, some roads are one way even when they look like 2. Safe travels. The management. I pulled over, grabbed my camera, hit playback. The footage was there, all of it. But edited. Professional quality, angles I hadn't shot, perspectives that were impossible. The figures were gone, replaced by lens flares and shadow play. The impossible physics remained, but sanitized, explainable, safe for YouTube. And at the end, a title card I didn't create, Gravity Hill, where physics takes a vacation. Like and subscribe for more mysteries. I made it home, uploaded the video. It's sitting at 2.3 million views as I type this. Comments full of people saying they want to visit, calling it the coolest optical illusion they've ever seen, praising my editing skills and special effects. But here's the thing. I know what really happened. I remember. The road let me remember. And that's the worst part. Because now I know there are places where reality is negotiable, where the things we build develop their own agendas, where a simple stretch of asphalt can decide who comes and goes and how much of themselves they take with them. I've gained 150,000 subscribers since that night. My channel is thriving. But sometimes, when I'm editing, I find footage I didn't shoot. Angles from inside the pavement. Views from above that show my car was never alone on that road. Just surrounded by things my camera decided not to record. And every night, every single night, I dream about rolling uphill. The figures are there, waving, smiling, waiting, because the road remembers everyone who drives it. And some roads never really let you leave. So tell me, after hearing all this, do you still want to visit Gravity Hill? Do you want to test the optical illusion for yourself? Feel your car roll uphill while things that shouldn't exist watch for mirrors that show too much? The coordinates are real. The road is waiting. It's always waiting, and it's gotten so much better at editing since my visit. The next person might not even remember the truth. Might drive away thinking it was just a fun roadside attraction. A quirky little anomaly to post about on Instagram. Or they might end up like the physicist from 2003. The documentary crew from '98. The ones the voices mentioned but didn't elaborate on. The ones whose channels went dark. Whose final videos were nothing but static and whispers about roads that dream. But hey, that's just my experience. Just one night on a haunted hill. Maybe you'll be luckier. Maybe the road will like you better. Maybe those figures in the mirror will wave goodbye instead of following you home in dreams that taste like asphalt and sound like engines running in reverse. Maybe, but I doubt it, because I learned something that night. Something that keeps me awake. Something that makes me check my mirrors more than I should. Roads remember. They remember everyone who travels them. Every car, every footstep, every secret whispered in the darkness between destinations. And some roads, some special roads like Gravity Hill, they don't just remember, they collect. Sweet dreams. And if you do visit, if you can't resist the pull of the impossible, just remember what the gas station attendant told me. Don't turn your engine off. Don't look in the mirrors too long. And whatever you do, don't go back for a second look. The road doesn't like show-offs, but it loves an audience.